This is one of those games where if you want absolutely everything, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid from Renegade Games. A cooperative game of basically trying to take down all the various monsters, baddies, and bosses along the way, or die trying, get overwhelmed in the process. And so in the game, the general turn structure, all of that, the general turn structure is every single round you're going to be spawning enemies. You're going to go through this deck over here, flipping over cards, and then spawning these enemies on that location. So in this case, we're going to grab a Putty Patroller from our little pile of Putty Patrols over here. We're going to spawn him on Ernie's Juice Bar. Now, if at any point the location has a number of enemies equal to that over there, then the location will become overwhelmed and you'll have to start putting them in other areas, but you want to be mindful of that. You want to make sure you get them, well, completely clear, because if all the areas are overwhelmed, then you will, well, lose the game. So that's what you're doing over there, and you're going to do that 5 times, not just one card. You're going to grab 5 cards and put them out, continuously putting out more and more enemies on the various locations. From there, you're going to move to the action selection phase, where the Rangers are going to take their actions, using these little action tokens to take individual actions, trying to, move to recover their cards, which is basically their health and their attacks at the same time, and then ultimately to initiate attacks against the horde of Rangers, the horde of enemies, the controllers, the footmen, as well as the bosses and monsters you'll be fighting along the way. The general structure there, and this is where it will vary by game count. I have this set up as a 3-player game right now, which means each player has 3 actions they can utilize, so you're going to start wandering around, flipping these over to move to a different location, and then flipping them over to engage in an attack with that location with all the enemies, with all the Rangers present in that location. So having a bunch of your Rangers teamed up can give you a lot more flexibility, both in the powers they'll be able to apply to the individual fight. Each Ranger comes with their own unique power, and additionally with the flexibility you'll have from the various hand of cards that they have, because each player, while you take turns one at a time, so it's not inherently stronger to attack in a group, it gives you a lot more flexibility, both in terms of the hits you can take and the cards you can play in battle. The last action you can take is recovering a bunch of shields worth of cards. Again, this is both your actions as well as your health. Restoring a bunch of shields worth of cards, 6 shields specifically, across any cards from your discard pile, shuffling them into your deck, both so you can draw those and utilize those, and so you can use them to defend against the various attacks you'll receive. And then from there, you're basically going to the wrap up and then continue the cycle again and again and again. That's all that's happening every single round in Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. Although, the all that's happening part comes down to those battles. The recovery process, pretty simple. The moving process, just move to any individual spot on the board. Again, pretty simple. And I have this set up, by the way, with the easier side of the board, but you can additionally set this up with actual locations and abilities in the location, which provides you with a slightly more challenging fight to go through. And then the battle part is where the game actually has its nuance, because in the battle part, that's where you're actually engaging in the choices and the decision and the gameplay you're going to, well, see if you win or lose. When you have a battle, you're going to draw cards for all the enemies present. So for example, in this location here, I would go to these piles and I would grab 2 Putty Patroller cards and 1 Super Putty Patroller. I'm going to put them down in a card row that I will be trying to attack with the Rangers present. So I'm going to grab 1 Super Putty Patroller, and over here we have the ability Fast. Fast and Guard are 2 keyword abilities. Fast means the enemy attacks first, which is usually not what we want. And Guard means you can't attack cards next to cards that have guards unless those cards have guard as well. So this sleeping attack over here, which normally would be my first target so that they can't attack me, well, I'm going to have to let that one hit me because of the fact that they have guard. I'll have to attack them here. Although in this case it's not relevant anyway because this card will be attacking me first. The Ranger in question will go ahead, they'll have their hand size before battle. They have the opportunity to draw up additional cards. I'm going to go ahead and not do so because I have 1 card left here and I'd rather not die a horrible death that quickly. They're going to go ahead and attack me. They'll deal damage to me over there. They'll try to deal damage to me because they have fast. They go first. You're going to reveal a card. You're going to compare the number of shields on the card. So for example, over here I have 3 shields against the attack action. If the number that they attack you with is greater than the number of shields, you're going to put this card into your discard pile and continue drawing more cards until it isn't greater. If their attack is less than the number of shields, although to be more specific, you'll deal the damage, you'll subtract that number, and then you'll keep drawing. If the number of attack is less than the number of shields, then you put the card back down. Versus if the number is exactly even to the number of shields, that card is expended, but they stop their attack over there. So you're going to have the option to try to keep cards in your deck to hold back the attack, or perhaps lose cards. In this case, I lost the damage over there, but at least I managed to persevere past that. Then on my turn, I go ahead and take, and we're going to rotate the card to show it moved. On my turn, I get to spend the cards I have for their abilities. I'm not going to go through the full attack sequence over here, but the general idea is you're going to be either taking specific attacks, perhaps reactions, play this card when any Ranger suffers damage, to reduce that damage by 3. that probably would have been a better action too. Let's do that. Let's do that one over here. We're going to spend 0 energy and do that over there. At the beginning of battle, you do equip 2 energy to the battle pool over here. So I'm going to use the block over there. It's a good thing to look at your cards before actually engaging in battle. And then it's my turn to react to them. This card is expended. I'm going to try to attack this guard card, because if I can successfully take this guard card out, then it will skip that action effectively. So I don't know if I could. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and do... They're the same card, so it's not much of a choice here. I'm going to go ahead and do this over here. Spending lead the charge, spending 0 energy, attacking with 2 dice. Let's go ahead and find my dice. They're over here. And then I'm going to go ahead and roll these. And we got 1 and 1, which is not enough to kill it, unfortunately. Now, the good news is I do have once per battle. A ranger of your choice may re-roll any number of dice during an attack. I'm going to go for broke over here, hoping for a 3. Which I did not get. In fact, I did even worse. But that's okay, because I didn't plan on making this through. Had I successfully taken that out, let's say I had rolled this over here, like so, just so you can see how this works. Had I done that, then this card would be flipped over. I have killed this card, and I'm going to take the Putty Patroller and put him on this track where, as I gain more of them, I can eventually unlock more of these cards over there. So I do that. Let's pretend I got that over there. I attack them. When this card goes to this activation to activate, it's going to skip this activation entirely. Just rotating, it does nothing at all because the card has been taken out. And then it's back to my turn, where I'll play Lead the Charge again, although this time, the next time any ranger performs an attack during this battle, add 1 die to that attack. So this time, I can spend all 3 dice, hopefully actually taking out that health of 2 over there, which should be doable. This time I actually did it with no cheating on camera work needed. And I'll go ahead and deal 2 damage to it. Again, flipping it over, this time taking out a Super Putty Patroller, putting him on the track like so, and then these cards can go to the respective discard pile. When they activate their final card, I have the opportunity to attack 1 more time, which means I actually could have attacked that first card over there, and that's basically what happens during a battle. You're going to choose a ranger to take a turn. You're going to utilize the various effects of the actions you have over here, of the specific ranger abilities to reroll, to mitigate, to add damage before battle, during battle, different things like that, and then you're going to hopefully take them out before they can take you out, although the abilities will mitigate or decide what you can actually do. Now, boss battles, that's where things heat up in particular, because when you have a boss battle, so for example, this Nasty Knight over here, you're going to be shuffling their deck of cards and placing down 4 cards in the top row. Regardless, this one boss there, they always get 4 cards. You're going to put down 4 cards. Then you're going to put down the individual enemy cards below that row. So you have a whole bunch of things. And adjacency in this game refers to both rows. So you have a whole bunch of more guard abilities, a whole bunch of different attacks over here. Smash and Slash is a 4 health card that's going to deal 3 damage to a single ranger twice, which is devastating. And the problem is they're being guarded on both sides, guarded by cards that if I actually attack those cards, they're going to reflect damage back at me. And so the bosses and Rita Repulsa both heat things up, as opposed to in terms of the level of strategy and decisions you have to bring to whether you can or can't survive that battle, whether you're going to draw cards into your hand, and what you're going to roll, what you're going to attack with, and how it's going to work in terms of ultimately just getting the job done. So there's a lot more strategy there. And then when eventually you take out 4 cards from a boss, that's when they're defeated. And that might take multiple battles. When you defeat a boss card, you set it off to the side to show that, hey, I got 2 of their cards. You may have to attack a second time or engage with them with other rangers to slowly take them out, but you don't want to go into those battles alone. Trust me on this, the bosses are where things heat up. Rinse and repeat until you either lose the game or take down all the monsters. 2 monsters in a game, plus Rita Repulsa, plus the ultimate boss. And that is basically what's happening in Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. So, let's talk about this game. Oh, and when you fill up this track over here, you'll be getting one of these cards, unlocking it for the respective ranger to get extra abilities. You can utilize these once per turn. And that's what's going on in Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. Let's talk about things. So, ease of play. The game is actually pretty simple to teach, especially if you're used to cooperative games, because the sequence of put things on the board, deal with those bad things, put more and worse things on the board, deal with those bad things, rinse and repeat across the rounds until you eventually win or lose. Fairly simple engine to follow. Plus the action selections. Again, rangers have 3 actions of the turn. You're either moving, you're trying to preserve and heal your health basically, or you're initiating attacks against the baddies with all your rangers in one place. And a single ranger initiating an attack counts for all the rangers that are there. So if you time your movements and your activations properly, you'll be able to get a bunch of damage dealt, clearing up these locations from being completely overwhelmed. So the pure gameplay is fairly simple to go through. Enough little small edge cases where the rulebook has to go through stuff. I feel somehow the rulebook could have been easier while still feeling it was pretty easy, but there's not a ton going on in terms of the difficulty or nuance of understanding this. Fairly easy game to set up and table. I will say it can run longer than you might think it would. This is a game that feels like it falls into the 45 minute to an hour range, but practically speaking, I don't think I've ever finished a game in under an hour and a half. I do take my time when deciding the actions I'm going to do, so maybe we're slowing it down, but generally I would say an hour and a half plus for what the game is, even though it feels like it should be shorter, if that makes sense. Table space isn't bad. You have your individual rangers, but what you see here is basically what you have. Add a few decks for if you're playing with a full 5 ranger complement. As far as player count, this is a 2 to 5 player game. I've played this at 1, 2, and 4 players. To be very clear, 1 does not mean controlling a single ranger. I don't recommend that. I don't think I've ever had less than 3 rangers in this game. When I played 2 players, we each control 2 rangers. When I played 4, we each controlled 1. When I play with 1, I control a minimum of 3 rangers. So you want to control a bunch of rangers in the game, which might be overwhelming because you have separate hands of cards for each person. But I would say I generally enjoyed it at all player counts. More players means a little less activation. So at 4 players, I just use fewer activations, fewer times being spent making decisions. I would say probably 2 was my sweet spot for this game, but 1, 2, 4, all enjoyable as far as the player counts. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking. There's a lot of teamwork in this game. One of the reasons I like the 2-player count a lot is the aspect of trying to work together to figure out how you can persevere. Now, specifically with the monster battles, I tend to find the pure foot patroller battles to be just not that interesting, but when you get to the monster battles, the boss battles, there's a lot of teamwork as far as how can we take out those cards? What cards do you have? What actions can you take? What abilities can you contribute? Is it the right time to contribute that ability? There's a lot of hand and deck management in this game, and there's a lot of decision space around how you actually try to stop that boss row, that monster row, from overwhelming you. Because those monster cards can be powerful, they can be obnoxious, and you have to find ways to make your way past those guards, to utilize certain abilities. Kimberly Hart has abilities that jump past guard, but choosing which cards you want to jump past on, that's a big deal, because they're all going to hurt you in different ways, and it's trying to figure out the balance of which ones will hurt you the least, or how you can combine everything going on here, the various the Zord cards, whatever these are called, that you have over here, plus the abilities. I'm not a Power Rangers fan, in case that was missed by me saying whatever these cards are over here. But yeah, trying to figure out how you can work all together to actually deal with the card row. There's a lot of teamwork, a lot of table talk, and a lot of just decision space in this game. And there's a lot of variety, sort of, in the game. The variety is going to come from the different rangers you have in the base game. There's a lot of variety in the terms of the expansion content, although you do have to pay more for that. But if you want expansion content, there's an absolute ton. The base game is going to have 4 monsters, and you're using 2 per game, only 1 boss, but it will take multiple plays to see everything that the base game has to offer, and that's just in terms of seeing what it has to offer. Forget the actual decision space past that. So the base game has a decent but not overwhelming amount of content, and expansions give you an absolute ton. If you're prepared to spend money on this game, there's a lot of stuff. There's a million different rangers, there's tons of bosses, tons of monsters, tons of everything in the game. So depending how much you're willing to spend, this game has the opportunity to get that variety that you need in here. And the game difficulty is decent. Again, ignoring the individual foot soldier battles, the game has a decent amount of difficulty. I've won this as often as I've lost this, and there are ways to make it more difficult as well. So this is not some casual, you roll a few dice, make a few simple decisions. You have to fight to make it past those monsters and bosses. They are really going to bring the pain, and you have to tactically plan around what you need. And I like that the game makes it feel like when you actually get something done, when you actually find those combinations of cards, and when you roll well, which is not really skill so much as luck, but when you get those things down, it really feels like you took something down that was hard. And there's a nice mix of mitigation and luck. Speaking of rolling dice, there's a nice mix of mitigation and luck, specifically for those times where you can't take a chance on the dice. There are usually, most of the rangers have a few cards here and there which don't involve rolling dice, which do involve doing direct damage based on a variety of criteria, and those cards can be incredibly impactful for when you just can't afford to be wrong. As far as what I don't like, I don't care for the miniatures off the bat. This is not a big deal at all, obviously, but I don't love the giant, chunky miniatures. I tend to prefer a different style of sculpting, and so a lot of the bling of this game and a lot of the cost of this game and the expansions is, to a certain extent, lost on me, because this has the cost, the price point of a giant, miniature-heavy game, and I don't really care about the miniatures in this game. It's just they're not to my personal taste. It's obviously a personal thing. Factor in if that works for you or doesn't work for you. But I just feel I got the price tag of a miniatures game without getting the feeling that I typically get from a miniatures game, if that makes sense. But more importantly, past, aesthetic things, more importantly, movement feels kind of unnecessary in this game. Movement feels like a little gimmick just to kind of deal with the action, economy, the action economy of the game. Moving around from location to location just feels something you have to do to get the game moving. Moving, not pun intended over there. The real game comes down to how you use your cards against the card rows, how you engage in those battles. The entire process of having a board and dealing with movement feels like just something that had to be structured, which makes this entire thing over here kind of feel unnecessary. You have to go through the motions because that's the way the game is designed, but I don't get any form of appreciation from the decision space around what's going on here. I only get the decision space, the appreciation from the decision space of these cards in the battle. Which brings me to my last point, which is the table space therefore feels unnecessary. The table space is not overwhelming, but in terms of the cost, the miniatures, the table space, all these other factors of a game I don't care about for the game that I do care about, which is the battling, which is the monsters you're fighting against. And then lastly, I just don't think the horde battles are, the regular miniature battles are worth my time, so to speak. They're ridiculously easy, and this might vary when you have expansions. This might vary if you add in other types of miniatures. I've only played with the base game content so far, and so I just find fighting against a bunch of putty patrollers and super putty patrollers, there's always a limit of 4 cards you draw per battle. I have never found those to be remotely engaging. They're again, like movement, it feels like a bit of my action economy is being spent. I have to take care of them, which is going to cost me action points. I'll have to recoup my deck. Those are decisions around the general action economy, but the actual battle themselves feel like a complete waste of time as I go through the motions, try to be efficient for the sake of the greater game, but aren't challenged in those battles. It's only once you have the monsters and once you have the boss in play that I actually feel challenged by the battles that are happening, which are my favorite part of the game. As far as I can see others not liking, obviously tons of dice rolling. If you're not comfortable with a degree of just complete randomness, of things working out, of making decisions that you're going to roll 4 dice, which is definitely enough to do 3 hits, because I mean, just statistically speaking, you should be fine, and then having that happen where you roll 2 hits, which is not that crazy. I wonder what the stats are. There's 2 misses on each die, but yeah, you could actually have things that don't work out the way they should, and that's present. There's some mitigation from other characters, other dice, other ways to do things, but you could have things just not work out based on the luck. Additionally, the expansion content. As much as I tend to think that that's a pro to have the expansion content available if you want to dive into it, this is a game where if you're not prepared to spend that much money, you might find that having the base game and knowing there's expansion content out there, but not wanting to spend genuinely hundreds of dollars on all the expansion content for it, you might find that that's annoying, that you kind of want it all or nothing. It's just the very existence of the expansion content may bother you in terms of feeling that you're not getting the complete experience, and in some cases, people might feel like the base game does not give you enough variety. I know I've seen that complaint. I don't feel it's that bad, although I guess it is relative to the price point, because the price point is not cheap here, so maybe relative to the price point it's that bad, but looking at it purely from the game itself, I feel the variety is there for the singular experience. But if you want that expansion content, if you want additional variety, that's money you're going to have to spend. Lastly, the game is deceptively difficult. If you walk into this expecting some sort of Marvel United light little play some cards, do everything you need to do, and simple low decision space, this is a deceptively difficult game. The choice you have to make, the way you have to combo your cards, the way you have to do things to survive, this game is more difficult than you might otherwise think. Walk into this experience knowing that. As far as final thoughts on Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid, I don't care for the theme of Power Rangers at all. It's not something I grew up with. I never really watched the TV shows. I think I've watched an episode here or there. I don't know. My kids watch it. I never cared for the theme. I watched the movie, didn't care for the movie, although I don't know what the general opinion of Power Rangers fans are there. So this is nothing as far as the IP. I have no pull in the IP here, and that might be relevant here because I think depending on who you are, that's going to be a big part of the draw here. I really like the action puzzle. And speaking of IP, by the way, they have on Kickstarter the G.I. Joe version of this game utilizing the same system. So if you don't care about Power Rangers, but you like everything else going on here, and you are a fan of G.I. Joe, there is a game currently coming out for that as well that gives you that same basic idea, just with a totally different theme, using the same, I believe they're calling it the Guardian system. So this is a game where you could put different IPs on it, and they may well put other IPs on it, and frankly, if they threw a Marvel IP on it, I would like this more than I currently do. I like the game. I like the little combat mechanisms. I really enjoyed this puzzle here. For me, the biggest problem is I don't think I'm willing to commit to all the expansion content that this game has, and I am one of those people that kind of wants it all, and so I'm not willing to commit to the full amount of expansion content for the game that I currently have, and I feel like I'm getting a lot of bloat of things that aren't pulling me in. I'm getting a theme that I'm not particularly, attached to. I'm getting miniatures and production that is very, very solid, but not personally appealing to me, but has the price tag of, well, appealing to me, and so I'm not really willing to overly commit, especially when you factor in that some of the mechanics of the game, the movement, the smaller battles, aren't pulling me in. If this were just the selection you have here, if this were just the battles, and if it were efficiently arranged around that, and even if it wasn't a miniature game, which if you watch my channel, you know I like miniature games, then I would be a lot more drawn in because I really, really like the battle system. There's a lot of choice around how you survive. There's a lot of decision space there, and I find it incredibly satisfying to engage with the monster and actually survive when starting off the battle you thought that you were just finished. That is a lot of fun. For me, this is a 3.5 out of 5. A lot of strong highs, but a lot of things that also just didn't work for me as much. So it's a 3.5 out of 5. Solidly enjoyable game, especially if you are someone that is pulled in by the theme, then I think this is worth giving a shot. As far as other game recommendations, this gives me a lot of similar feelings to a game called Sky Tier Horde. Not currently available. You might be able to late pledge. I'll throw a link down below if I remember to. But Sky Tier Horde gave me a lot of similar puzzles around the decisions around how you're going to survive every individual wave, and that was focused exclusively on the card battle aspect. Or if you're looking for something that has the dice rolling, but where the movement matters a lot more, but has a similar degree of decision space, of trying to survive, of overwhelming hordes, then Zombicide. My personal favorite that's available now is Black Plague. Highly recommend that one. And then I will talk about Marvel United, not as a recommendation here. I do recommend Marvel United, but specifically because I've seen this game compared to Marvel United by people, and it's very, very different. The games are totally different weight classes as far as the decision space they bring to the table. I like them both in very different ways. They both give me a different reason to dive into the gameplay experience, but this is not a light game. I do recommend Marvel United, but nothing to do with Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. Hope you found this video helpful. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and have a good one.